Now, Sports Talk with Brodes. Here's Hunter Brody.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome on into Sports Talk with Brodes. I know the Sixers played the Spurs tonight, so there will be more conversation generated about this team. But I really want to talk about just the bone bruise. I want to talk about what does this mean for the team, for Joel Embiid himself, for the backstretch, for Daryl Morey, and possibly does this change the way he thinks about things? So there's a lot of ways that you can really apply this to where the 76ers are, and let's just talk about initial reaction first. So when I had the post-game podcast the night of everything that went down, I was so negative, and that's just the way that I naturally think. When I see a player go down that way, in the way that he did, where you saw the knee lockout, you saw his reaction. Now, he walked off, but walking off doesn't mean much to me when you think about worst-case scenario. So I was already thinking, we're doomed. This is terrible. This is awful. I don't know how I'm going to live anymore. We just lost the MVP of the league. So when I see bone bruise, of course, I'm not upset to the level that I was prior to that. I still think, though, that bone bruise is worse than what people are thinking. So I wrote down 4 different sources that were tweeting this out during Twitter, and they all kind of worded it differently. So with Woj, he originally stated that there's no structural damage with the MRI. Then he responded to himself. He replied to himself and said, Sixers source expects to miss 2 weeks. This is a, quote, deep bone bruise. Deep bone bruise. My point of bringing this up, though, real quick, is bone bruises are brutal. Bone bruises are better than a break, but it could be just as long as a broken bone. It doesn't sound like it's as bad because, it's just a bruise. But bone bruises are insanely brutal. And I never want to apply what I have experienced as a college athlete to what an MVP of the NBA is like when it comes to injuries and when it comes to the medical staff, training staff to get this guy back out there on the floor, because people weren't rushing me to get back out on the ice like you will with Joel Embiid making a back push for an NBA playoff run. But I thought, okay, you know what? A puck hit me in the foot. I'll be good to go. I saw it was getting a little swollen, but all right, it was a bone bruise. I was out 7-8 weeks. It did damage. I couldn't get my foot in the boot forever. And if this is labeled a deep bruise, I think that this could be way more than 2 weeks. So Woj is hearing that from a Sixers source, they expect him to miss 2 weeks. Shams expected to miss 2 to 3 weeks. Pompey says no timetable for his return, which was what was stated in Woj's original tweet before he replied to himself. And then the 76ers Twitter said reevaluated in 2 weeks. I bring this up because I don't want people to think that there's a 2-week process involved here for Embiid getting back and being able to play. I would be stunned. Absolutely shocked. I'd probably collapse and faint if you saw Joel Embiid play in 2 weeks. Seriously, I mean, I would be insanely in numb mode. There's no way. This is going to possibly hurt the Sixers' chances of getting that top seed. And I don't even think that that's that big of a deal. I've had this conversation in a podcast before about how people overreact and are so obsessed with the number 1 seed. And there are fans coming back, so it does change the perspective on it. Because one of my theories throughout this whole no fan thing is, all right, so your home floor is on the floor. And you're at the Wells Fargo Center. All right, there's no fans. But even when there are fans, and I went through it, number 2 seeds win the NBA title. You got to be up top. There's no doubt that being the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th seed in the NBA, it's not the NHL where an 8th seed can win the Stanley Cup. You got to be in that upper echelon. You got to be in that 1 or 2 area. And if you are, then okay, you're still in a good spot to go win a title. So I think people do get obsessed with the 1 seed. But when you look at this 2-week timetable, just hypothetically looking at the schedule and what's there, that is missing 8 games. And that's if he just gets thrown right into things as soon as he gets reevaluated, which I don't think is a reality. Now, if it goes to April 3rd, that's 10 games and against 8 opponents that are over 500. So keep that in mind as well, including a road trip where you play the Lakers, where you play the Clippers, where you play the Denver Nuggets. I just think at this point, while they can still win some regular season games and hang in there, and Ben Simmons is going to have the microscope on him, and I think he's kind of wants that, to be honest with you. The way that Ben Simmons has been playing to this point since February and really transitioning here into the next month after the All-Star break, I'm hoping this continues, but playing that strong and having that type of personality out there on the floor and being a monster. And you also had the Wizards announcer, I played the audio before, just bashing Ben Simmons, saying he's the most overrated dude in the league. Well, guess what? Ben Simmons took that to heart in a good way, not in a way where I think it's to an extreme and he's thinking about the wrong things. No, it's a motivational type of message to hear where he's blasting the guy out there on his Instagram story and kind of throwing some shade back. But I think that that's big. I'm collecting that information and saying, all right, now Ben Simmons is going to go out there and really try and make a statement of, all right, you know what, Joel Embiid isn't here, the MVP of the league isn't here, and I'm, quote, overrated? Yeah, okay, give me the basketball. Let's go. Let's make this happen. Look, it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be at the same rate as it was, but I do think that there's going to be this explosion of Ben Simmons to try and prove to everyone who's doubting him right now, and for everyone who's kind of giving him a tough time without Embiid. Now it's, hey, here's an opportunity for me to shut people up. Dominate the game. Give you 30 plus. Maybe I'm being too optimistic here. 30 plus is a lot for Ben. But I saw him drop 42. I saw my man give me a 50 burger. 40 burger, I mean. I wish it was a 50 burger. A 40 burger. So you know what, damn it? 30, 12, and 8. Ben Simmons just going to town. We'll see. Not every night. Watch, they're going to play the Spurs tonight, and it's going to be an ugly game where I get on afterwards and just go to town on Ben Simmons. But no, I'm just talking of the bigger picture. If he misses 8, 10, 12, 14 games, I don't know. Will Ben explode and be that kind of, yo, what are you saying? Okay. What are you saying about me? I wonder if that's how Ben is going to approach it. Now you have some options, though, at the 5. And if you think about what they can do, they can play Ben Simmons at the 5, which I do think is something that they are going to want to do in the playoffs. I know Dwight Howard has his role, and I know Joel Embiid is going to log an insane amount of minutes when the postseason is here, but there is something to be said about their usage of Ben Simmons at the 5 off the ball. I do think they really like to use that. It keeps that type of defender out there as well. Just something to look out for. You have Dwight Howard, you have Tony Bradley, who's playing nice basketball right now. I don't think he's going to do anything when games intensify, but if you're talking about having to create some sort of new look for a little bit of time, you got to have someone who's playing with confidence, and he seems to be right now getting the ball in an area on the floor where he's like, okay, I'm going to score, damn it. I'm going to make a play. So you have that with Tony Bradley, you have Dwight Howard, you have Mike Scott, who's been a better version of himself as of late. Still not to where I like Mike Scott, but he has been poor in the last couple of seasons, and it does seem like, hey, maybe there's something to Mike Scott finding his groove. And I wonder if Paul Reed is in play, because he has been unreal with the Blue Coats, the Delaware Blue Coats. Every single night you see all these guys, 30 points, all these beat reporters who cover the Sixers are like, hey, Paul Reed, man, he's putting himself on notice. He's making some noise, and he's making it tough for these coaches to be like, yo, hey, what are we going to do about Paul Reed? What is there in Paul Reed? The name Paul Reed is coming out of the Sixers organization a lot of times. Consistently. Is there something with Paul Reed that you might see due to the circumstances? He's making a name for sure. MVP-wise, with the MVP, if you're going to miss already to what he missed this season, right? So he hasn't played all the games. There were times where he sat out and we were bothered by it because we wanted to see him dominate. If you're going to miss even more with this bone bruise, I think it's going to get to the point where you lose the MVP votes, where you miss too much time, where when you were available and when you were playing, you were the most entertaining guy in the league, and there wasn't anyone that can stop you because your face-up game has become so elite, and because your footwork was already elite, but you're still moving it around like Olajuwon, nitpicking and picking your time to do it. Not all the time, but you're picking and choosing when it's best, and oh, it's special. You have the Euro step coming down the lane, starting out by the three-point line and taking whoever. It doesn't matter who's on you. He's going to Euro step down the lane, and you're not going to get in the way because nobody wants to take a charge and step in front of that man. And the three-point shooting, that's now at 42%, which is crazy. We're not talking about Steph Curry here. We're not talking about Kevin Durant or James Harden. We are talking about a 7-footer who now just like picks and chooses his Olajuwon foot moves times. It's same with the three-point shooting. It's picking the right time. It's the calculated risks with all of his shot selections that has now really morphed into the greatness of what Joel Embiid is. And you are now being taken from that. You're not watching it every night because he is going to be missing so many games. He's going to be way too far gone by the end of it, in my opinion, with this bone bruise, where I think you might have just lost that. But quite frankly, I don't care. That doesn't mean much to me. Because at the end of the day, the goal is the Larry O'Brien Trophy. And the goal is at least to get to the Eastern Conference Finals and give me one hell of a run against the Brooklyn Nets. I hate to say that would satisfy me, because everyone wants one thing and one thing only, and that's winning rings and winning championships. But if I see this team go up against the Brooklyn Nets with a healthy Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons is taking steps in his half-court game, which will help the Sixers out in the long run, and you put everything out there on the floor and you fall to an unbelievable Nets team that has 3 superstars that can murder you on any given night, well then you know what? It is what it is. But if that's where I'm at, though. That's what I care about more. Way more than the individual statistics and the individual hardware. That's more for, all right, when your career is over and you're 50 years old and you go into your office and you go into wherever you keep all your accolades and whatever you've won throughout your profession, all right, then you can go back and be, 2021, we had a 72-game season. I went on a tear. I was the best in the business. Everyone was afraid of my name when they saw it. That's when you can dive back into those conversations. But for right now, in terms of what this means for MVP and how that would affect my life, I really don't care. And, maybe that's me being selfish, but that's the way I feel. I also felt like I really needed some water there. Ain't that the truth? I guess with where we are here, I know that there's the general reaction of, thank the Lord it wasn't anything more serious. And I can get behind that, because that is how I felt as soon as I saw Woj bomb go off and I got the notification everywhere, 7 different outlets giving me notifications on my iPhone. I was happy, because it was definitely in my brain that worst case scenario is in play here, and I went back and rewatched it over and over again, even though I couldn't. It was so ugly, I had to get my eyes off of it, but at the same time, I was so drawn to it because I was in disbelief that we were even in that spot to begin with. I kept watching the knee lock, and I kept watching what happened with the knee, and I'm like, oh, it's so bad, look at it! Look at him grabbing the knee! So the bone bruise news is definitely a positive one from that angle. But I know just from experience and going through it myself and just knowing how this all works, there's no way that 2 weeks is the timetable of Joel Embiid getting back there on the floor. And when he does take such a long period off, am I afraid that he's going to be rusty and not have his full game, full potential? There's probably going to be some rawness to it. You are going to have to battle through pain. You're going to be playing with a bunch of discomfort. So everything I talk about with the footwork and the face-up game and the jab steps and all of that, will he be able to effectively be as great? And will he be able to shoot the same percentage and get off the shots the same way? I would imagine that your adrenaline's kicking. You're excited to get back out there where, yeah, you're going to play through it and it will linger and it will be tough at times. But when you're great, you can still excel with that. You can face that type of adversity, still go out there and still jab step guys to death and knock down a 15-footer. So I don't expect him to fall off from a 40-point performance type of player to now he's just constantly giving you 22. I still think it's in there, but it's going to be some time, and it's going to hurt you, and you're going to miss a little bit. If you remember, back in that 2017 run or so, when the Sixers went on that unbelievable backstretch and they're winning games, it was a bone bruise that kept Joel Embiid off the floor. Now, different circumstances. Now, you get your ass out there because we need you, because championship caliber basketball is the end goal. That's what we are focused on. Back then, that wasn't necessarily the case. When he misses the season with the bone bruise, it's not really the case. You're still in that whole more of the process mode, and you're more in that analyze mode. It's no more analyzing. We have analyzed. Joel Embiid is special, and you have to have him available or you are screwed. Will this affect Daryl Morey making a move? I don't think so. Because you still anticipate him, no matter what shape he's in, no matter if he's fighting through pain or not, you're still expecting to have Joel Embiid at some point later on in this season where your goal is still going to be the same. So if you do got to bring someone in here, even with, like, if this didn't even happen, you're still thinking of doing that now. The unfortunate thing is, if you do go get that player, if you go get Kyle Lowry, if you go get PJ Tucker, Larry Nance Jr., not all of them, I'm just naming a few guys that I think are in the works and in the conversation. George Hill is another name. If you're looking at these players to come in, it would be nice to see them fit their role and be who you expect them to be. That would probably still be the case because you're starting to see that now with Doc. Dwight Howard is sticking as that backup five, no matter if Embiid is there or not. Shake Milton is playing that six-man role, no matter if Ben Simmons is available or not. They'll give the rock to Seth Curry. They'll give the rock to somebody else to try and establish the offense and run the offense through them. They're keeping guys in roles. So if you get a PJ Tucker, if you get a Larry Nance Jr., I would imagine that they're going to put them in the roles that they think they will play for this team when Joel Embiid is available, but you just don't get the same sense of what they can bring unless Joel Embiid is out there. You can still see them get into certain spots, but if Joel Embiid is out there and you're up 15 or 12 because of how great he's playing compared to, okay, now you're down 6 and now you're running different action and different players are getting you the ball, and it just changes the whole dynamic of who they are on that team because everyone now is just, they're a different version of themselves to a degree. So you're not getting that full experience of what you bring over. It shouldn't limit you from what you do. You're still going to have to get, like, let's say they go out and get a Kyle Lowry. That's one that would impact even more because without Joel Embiid, if he slides into the starting rotation, which he would, now it's, all right, we don't even have our starting five and all this time being played with Tony Bradley or Dwight Howard. It's significantly different than most of the offensive plays that we are going to use to try and get buckets when we need to and try to gain the lead and come out early and dump it into Embiid and let him go to work. Now you're running a completely different offense with Kyle Lowry and Ben Simmons. But once again, it doesn't change anything. This doesn't change Daryl Morey's approach, and it shouldn't. He still needs to establish help for this team when big picture Joel Embiid is out there on the floor and he's back from this bone bruise. I'm just now sort of like I expected the worst from the initial injury. I'm expecting the worst when it comes to the timetable on when he's back. I think this bleeds into double-digit games for sure. And if it's deep, bone bruises do not just go away. They go on forever. They really do. It goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I had it in my foot, so it hurt a lot. I had to drag my foot all around. We were playing pro teams in France. We went to the French Alps, and we played professional teams. And in the first or second game, I blocked a shot with my foot, and here we are walking around all these beautiful towns in the French Alps, and I'm dragging my foot. I had to get a cab to meet my entire team up to the top of the mountain. I shouldn't even went on the walk. I really shouldn't have. I had to take a cab all the way up top of the hill we were at, and I had to meet my teammates as they were walking. It took them hours. I'm sitting here like, this sucks. Brutal. Now, I don't know how that feels with the knee compared to the foot, which makes contact every time you plant it onto the ground. But I'd imagine it's just as disgustingly terrible. And I think that this is pretty tough. And I saw people going, I can't believe that there are Sixers fans out there still upset about this news. As if you can't be upset with the bone bruise because it could have been a lot worse. And I think that that's totally a flawed mindset. Because it's not as if there's only one bad problem here. It's not as if there's only one bad issue. There's only one thing that can possibly upset you out of this Joel Embiid news. That is ridiculous to think that that would be the case. There's way more than that. Him missing, if he ends up missing, let's say 6 weeks, 5 weeks. Let's go with 5 weeks. Over a month of time when you got to play your most important basketball to really, convince yourself that, hey, we got this. We are this team. This is our season. This is our year. Let's go. Let's get ourselves into position here and let's go for a ride. Let's attack it. This is the time to do it. And if you miss 5 weeks of Embiid and then he's got to come back, work himself into it a bit more, 6 weeks, missing Joel Embiid for 6 weeks of the backstretch? Yeah, sorry, that doesn't make me all pumped up. Sorry that I'm not satisfied with that just because it's not the worst case scenario. I'm not buying the 2 weeks thing. I'm not buying the 2 weeks thing. And I hope I'm wrong. And I would come down here in my recording studio and say, hey, people, I was wrong. I apologize. I was wrong. But I don't think that that's going to be the case. I do need to, before we go to the Anytime Hotline, I do need to tell you about my friends over at DeSimone Jewelers. I went there for my fiance's engagement ring, and when I was on one knee in my backyard with the heart-shaped blanket and candles and wine glasses, I don't think there were actually candles there, it was wine glasses and champagne and all of it, she fell over. She was stunned by the bling. The rocket was shining right into her face, and I knew everything about it. Why is that? Well, because they don't use sale tactics. They actually show you the options and educate you. They gave me this magnifying glass, and they explained why this is better than the alternatives, and they were shining. Oh, it was just amazing. They taught me everything about the ring and why it does what it does and how it's built the way that it's built, and they treat their customers like family. They customize and manufacture every ring they make from start to finish on location, and because of that, they're able to beat competitors' prices. I've sent so many family members and friends in their direction, and I get the same response. Brodes, they're the best. And you'll see exactly what I mean when you go in there and tell them Brodes sent you. Check out their information, their phone number and website. It's all in the description. They are a family-owned business for over 40 plus years. They moved from Jewelers Row to Haddonfield, New Jersey. They really, truly are the best in the business. All right, so we have some Anytime Hotline calls. Some of them are from after the incident. And then there are a few that are in this folder that was reactionary at the time. We'll see where this takes us. We'll start with after, though. So here we go. Let's kick it off.
Okay, so obviously my opinion has changed on this. After hearing, it looks like a full injury, really dodged a bullet. That injury did not look good. And so for him to be reevaluated in 2 weeks, I feel like it might have been the best case scenario. Obviously, you don't like the whole reevaluated 2 weeks thing, but at this point, you're really just praying it's not the ACL or a tear or anything. And I'll gladly sacrifice him, like, being out of the MVP race or not winning the MVP or whatever, if he's healthy for the playoffs. I think, again, hopefully this team can just stay afloat in these 2 weeks at least. It's probably going to be more than that.
Yeah, it is going to be more than that. It really is. So why don't we pull up the Sixers schedule? Because I mentioned some of their games where they go on that West Coast, and that would take them into April, where they play the Lakers, they play the Clippers, and they play the Denver Nuggets. So tonight they play the Spurs. Good team, just a sound team, not anything crazy, but a sound team. They play the Knicks, who are a playoff team. They play them on Tuesday, although they are a fraud playoff team. Then they got the Bucks at home. They got the Kings at home. They got the Knicks on the road, Warriors, Lakers, Clippers, Nuggets, Cavs. stay afloat. What does stay afloat mean? So let's say they missed 10, because we went through it. April 3rd would be 10 games being missed. 8 of those teams have over a 500 record. So, teams that aren't some cakewalk where you're just going to, you're going to go play the Wizards or, one of those bottom feeder teams. There's some substance to them. So if they go 5-5, is that acceptable? If they go 6-4, are you okay with that? Anything more than that obviously would be good. 6-4, 5-5, in that range, is that staying afloat? Because you got to remember, the Brooklyn Nets are coming now. The Brooklyn Nets are 26-13. The Sixers are 26-12. The Milwaukee Bucks are 24-14. The Knicks moved down a little bit, although they're not far off from the 6th seed Hornets, the 5th seed Celtics. They're in that same category as those teams. So they're in 7th now. They were in 4th, I believe. They must have slipped down, but it's not like there's much separation. The Heat seem to be sniffing a little bit of blood, and they're 20-18, but where they started and the Jimmy Butler nonsense, it did seem like it was a disaster for a little bit, and they're finding something I should say. But regardless, that 1, 2, 3 seed, I'm just thinking about them staying afloat, as the caller mentioned. But let me ask you this, though, because this is where I always get into some debates with people in the comments section at all. When Ben and Joel don't play, I don't put much stock into it because it doesn't tell me what this team is all about. So if they fall to 3rd seed, and let's say, I know it seems a little ridiculous, but let's say they fall to the 4th seed. I'm just hypothetically throwing it out there. And they lose a bunch of games. They go 2-8 over this 10-game stretch, 3-7, and it looks bad. And they can't find ways to grind games out. They can't close out games because they're struggling with rim protection, and they're struggling with generating half-court sets and half-court offense. So let's say all of that actually happens. Should I be scared? Because this team is not themselves without Joel Embiid. So it's the same kind of philosophy. If your big guy's not there, if Joel Embiid if he's just missing a random game due to back tightness, back soreness, and they lose and it's ugly, I normally don't get mad. Why? Because Joel Embiid didn't play. So if they go 3-7 and this team falls off and they fall in that 3-4 seed, are we now judging them on who they aren't? Are we now judging them on a version of themselves that is irrelevant because without Joel Embiid, you're obviously such a different team that isn't going to be able to compete. When you have Joel Embiid, you are going to be legitimately competing. And when I say compete, I'm talking about title-wise, not just NBA regular season-wise, which maybe, okay, well, if I think they can still hang with the NBA regular season, should that then bother me if they don't get the job done? Yes and no. There's a balance between this. So it's just hard for me to judge what this team is without having such a significant piece, if that all makes sense. So if they fall, I know the reaction is going to be, oh, they stink, they're 3-7, oh, they're falling. If they don't get the 1 seed, they're not going to be able to do it. Well, what happens if Joel Embiid then re-enters after missing 12, 13, 14 games, comes back, and then they win 3 in a row? Oh, well, hold on, Joel Embiid's back. Maybe we could do something, right? So it's going to be tough to kind of analyze it all with this big asterisk next to it, but that's kind of where we are right now. That's kind of where we are.
Hey, Brodes, I seen you were talking about the Sixers, and I seen you brought that point about Matisse Thybulle and Danny Green and how, like, if KD was on them. And, I see what you mean offensively. You know what I mean? Because KD would be able to double down on JoJo in the paint. But, I think we've seen how good JoJo's been against those double teams this year, man. And I know Matisse would have to make those shots, you know what I mean? And they would live with him shooting there. Because you said, what is he shooting, like 23% from 3? I know Danny's very streaky, man, but I think the one thing we're forgetting about here is who would you defensively want guarding KD? I think I would rather take that offensively and have Matisse guarding KD and causing him problems than Danny Green getting carved up on that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know Danny Green could guard in his own right, but let's be honest. At his age and at this moment in time, you're telling me KD's not dropping 30 on him every night?
He's dropping 30 on Matisse Thybulle, too. I mean, we're talking about Kevin Durant. While Matisse Thybulle might make somebody work harder when it comes to these elite superstars, I think Kevin Durant has had some tougher matchups than Matisse Thybulle in his time here in the NBA, and he's exploited those matchups. And that's not to downplay what Matisse Thybulle brings, but what I think you're doing is you're not giving the offensive side of the ball enough thought here. He's shooting 29% from three, which is totally brutal, and Ben Simmons would be on Kevin Durant, would be my guess. You've seen James Harden be defended by Danny Green, albeit in a regular season game, and he held his own. It wasn't the best defense in the world. It wasn't brutal, though. He held his own, and I think that what you have right now is you're going to have Ben Simmons on Kevin Durant to begin with. Maybe you have Danny Green on James Harden, and at this point, it would probably be someone like Seth Curry on Kyrie Irving, which can give you some problems. But you can't take away that spacing on offense for Matisse Thybulle for a long period of time. There's times where Matisse Thybulle is going to be out there, and he is going to be defending lethal talent, and he is probably going to make some plays. But it's going to be in limited action, and it's going to be with limited minutes. I don't think you can get away with 25, 30 minutes of Matisse Thybulle on the offensive side of the ball. You might see it where for 10 minutes, it's great and it's a great spurt. For 12 minutes, that's awesome. But then you got to get back to, all right, we need to help spacing the floor. And look, Matisse just went 3 of 3 the other night, and he knocked him down. If he hits his first 2, which, is asking a lot now for a 29% shooter, if he hits the first 2, well, then, now we're having a different conversation. But I think, yes, stopping Kevin Durant is a focus, but you also need to be able to produce points. And you're going to have to put up points. As great as your defense is, you are going to have to put up points to fight against the Brooklyn Nets team. You're not going to, if you go in with the philosophy of we have to bombs away and outscore them, that's flawed. You need to find a balance of you got to hold them to a reasonable number with your defense because that's your bread and butter. The Brooklyn Nets can score at will. Your bread and butter is we can defend very well. You got to hold them to a realistic number and then still counter with putting up points, though. So you're not going to outbomb them and outscore them with this, hey, we're going to bomb away and beat you that way. That's not who they are. So with that being said, your possessions need to have the proper spacing, and you're going to have to execute more times than not. And I think Danny Green professionally gives you that better opportunity. And that's not to say Matisse isn't going to have a role and he's not going to play well and he's not going to have such an important defensive skill set against these players. But there's a big difference of if you see it for 12, it doesn't mean, hey, he deserves 28. He deserves 25. He deserves to start. Well, then guess what? You might go on of those 12 minutes. Let's say he gets 12 normally, and you want him now to get 25. Those extra 13 minutes, you could be talking about an 8-0 drought offensively that's not being factored in, or, possessions that are just not getting good looks, not generating good looks because the defense is being able to defend you differently because no one's respecting that side of the game, or he's just shooting up bricks. He is getting that wide open look, and guess what? Matisse isn't hitting it. Matisse isn't knocking it down. Now, I believe you brought up also about the double teaming out of the post and where Joel is there with the passing. What is 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks off going to do to that feel of the game? It's all about getting into a feel. It's all about the rhythm. It's all about understanding, all right, double teams are coming. Where's my teammates going to be? Is there going to be some rawness to that where turnovers start to happen? It leads to some fast breaks when he returns. Him returning is somewhat of an afterthought right now, because it's about getting through this time without him. It's about establishing your identity without him at the moment. But, yeah, just all kind of things I think about while we sit here today and process the bone bruise out of Joel Embiid. But it is that time of year again, everyone. Conference tournaments are tipping off. Bubble teams are making their final push for a bid, while the top seeds are preparing for what they hope is a long run. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is putting new customers in the center of the action. Bet $4 on an underdog, win $256 if they win. It's that simple. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code Brodes when you sign up to turn $4 into $256 if the underdog of your choosing pulls off the upset. That's code Brodes to turn $4 into $256 for a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older, Pennsylvania only, new customers only. Restrictions apply in partnership with Meadows Racetrack and Casino. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, everyone. more basketball talk coming very soon as the Sixers play tonight. But thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you next time.